And like I said, I want to sort of pick something out that I felt from a storytelling perspective was worth considering for people who are creating their own stories. And I think with a Batman film, with a film with Batman and Joker, you kind of have to talk about the idea of creating a villain. And not just creating a villain, but creating a villain that's right for your particular hero. And I feel what makes this film so good is you have your protagonist in Bruce Wayne, Batman, and your antagonist in the Joker. And the Joker, like we mentioned, is so good at attacking Batman's weakness. So you've got a few things where, for one, the idea of duality works with the protagonist and antagonist, and they are essentially binary opposites of each other, where Batman represents order and Joker chaos. So again, you've got your hero and protagonist on opposing sides of an ideal. And I'll probably talk about this in another sort of podcast episode in more depth, but what is really good in The Dark Knight is this idea of like four corner opposition, where you've got not just the antagonist and protagonist, but you've got other characters that represent different shades of the ideal. And in this case, you've also got Harvey Dent and Commissioner Gordon. So in terms of creating a villain, you've also got an antagonist that pushes the protagonist into hard choices. So in this film, you have the idea of Joker, for example, demanding that Batman reveal himself, otherwise he'll be killing people, and that forces sort of Bruce Wayne to act. And obviously, like, Harvey Dent sort of takes that decision, but it's kind of the idea of the antagonist forcing the protagonist into hard choices, and that's how your protagonist is going to learn and progress over that story arc. And then again, the idea of conflict, and not just physical conflict, but conflict on the basis of ideals. So again, with this order versus chaos, kind of represents the ideal that they're fighting for, but also that they're fighting for the same goal. And this is also spoken by the Joker towards the end in terms of the battle for Gotham's soul. So when you're creating your protagonist, it's important to keep that in mind, so when you're creating your protagonist and antagonist, it's important to keep that in mind, because they must be competing for the same goal, so they can't both get what they want. And that's where you get your good and interesting conflict in the story. So yeah, I just feel like creating a villain is so important, and the Joker is such a great villain, not just because of, the acting is great, the look is great, the behavior is great, but he just fits so well for this particular protagonist. And I think when keeping that in mind, it means that you don't necessarily have to go with, as we're talking about comic book movies, you don't have to go with the, save the world, like, grand scale plot, which sometimes can sort of be a bit reductive, in the sense that it's hard to wrap your head around, the world's going to blow up or the universe is going to blow up. But when you reduce it to this kind of like battle of ideals, you can make it relatively small scale. And in this case, you've got, it all leads up to the idea of these two ferries, the Joker wanting to blow them up, which, in the grand scheme of things is quite small, but because it fits so well for these particular protagonists and antagonists and the themes of the story, it's really compelling. So yeah, just a few things to remember there. So when you're creating your own stories, you want to remember, or just think about what your film is really about, what ideals it represents, and how your protagonist and antagonist reflect the two sides of those ideals. You want to think about having your antagonist continuously push your protagonist into harder and harder choices over the course of your story. And then remember that conflict doesn't just mean physical conflict. It should relate to the themes of your story. So yeah, just some things to remember there. Yeah, let us know what you think about that. If you're writing your own story, how have you designed your villain to sort of compete with your hero? Yeah, feedback at mayamada.com.